Today is Wednesday, the 27th of April, and I am going to share a few of my thoughts on the two trees in the Garden of Eden. Now, I know there are other messages, there's other books written about this particular subject, but what I'm going to share is going to come from a little bit different perspective. So I'm going to do a little bit of reading starting in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, and I'm going to start with the very first verse. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Okay, I'm going to skip down a little bit here. God created the day and the night. He created the firmament, divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. All right, and I'm going to skip down to verse 9 and 10. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear," and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. Okay, that's the first time we hear that it says here that what God created, when God saw, and God saw that it was good. Verse 11, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind." Excuse me, and it was so. The end of verse 12 said, and God saw that it was good. Everything that he created, the trees, the plants, and so forth, God saw that it was good. All right. Next, God created the evening in the lights in the firmament, the greater lights, the sun and the moon. Down here at verse 18, and God saw that it was good. I'm just condensing this for sake of time. All right, and then verse 21, God created the animals, all of them after their kind, and they multiplied and brought forth abundantly. At the end of verse 21, and God saw that it was good. All right, and then verses 24 and 25, God brought forth the cattle, the creeping thing, beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. The end of verse 25, and God saw that it was good. I'm going somewhere with this, bear with me. All right, okay, and then then he created man and to rule. He created Adam and Eve. All right, now I'm going to skip into chapter 2. All right, and I'm going to go down to verse 7. I'm going to start chapter 2, verse 7. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. All right, and now I'm going to go down to verse 16. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, "Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die." Okay, I'm going to stop right there for a minute. And like I said, there are a lot of other messages that have gone into detail about exactly what those two trees were. I am not going to do that in what I want to share, because like I said, I want to go in a little bit different direction. Now there is a specific reason, purpose behind those two trees, but what I want to share today has to do with trusting and obeying God. The first little part of what I had read from Genesis, and I will include those two chapters in the description for you to read yourself. But God created many things for us. All of those were and are good. That's why I read those, the end of those passages when God saw that it was good. There were two trees in the garden. One was the tree of life. That was included in everything that God said for Adam and Eve that they could freely partake of. They could freely partake of the tree of life. There was only one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that God said, you cannot touch it, you cannot eat it, for in the day that you do, you will die. There was one thing there that they were not supposed to touch. All right, now I got a couple of things here that I want to share. Those that are familiar with Proverbs 3, verse 5, that says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. Now that tree was the knowledge of good and evil. Okay, and I want to read just a couple things here. All right, if you were to boil life down to its simplest elements, life is about choices. Every day of your life is spent making choices. All right. This verse here, Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. This admonition that was given in Proverbs is the same instruction that was given by God to Adam and Eve when he told them to trust him. He didn't maybe say it exactly this way, but to trust and obey him. Don't lean on your own understanding of what we think we should do. Okay? And Proverbs 3:5, when it comes to making choices, we should trust God's way of thinking and choosing over our own decision making ability. Okay? And I wanted to share something else here that I found. Hang on 1 second. That I thought was very interesting. For anyone who is familiar with the story of Pandora's box, if you are familiar with that story, and I will share a link to that. I'm just going to boil it down to that. Pandora's box is part of Greek mythology about a present that was given to Pandora on her wedding day, but she was not supposed to open it. All the other things, the gifts that were given to her, she could enjoy except for that one box. However, curiosity got the better of her, and when she did open that box, out of it came all of life's miseries. And I will share a link to that. You can go into that in more detail. But when I was thinking about the two trees in the Garden of Eden, and I had to go back for myself and read through Genesis 1 and 2 and see how many times that God said that the things that he did create specifically for Adam and Eve to enjoy, all of those things were good. There was only one thing that they were not supposed to touch, and that was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. To me, and from my perspective, like I said, I'm looking at this from a little bit different view. I saw a similarity between that and Pandora's box. Everything that Pandora had, she could enjoy except for that one box. But as we already know from history, Eve did touch the forbidden tree. Pandora did open up the forbidden box. Okay, and we already know the result of that. Misery, death, or sorrow, which it did indeed and has led to death. So I'm going to go back here and share just a little bit more from this thing that I read about why we should not look at our own understanding, not try to understand everything on our own, because there are things that are just, well, like for example, wait, I'm going to swing over here for a second. Those that are familiar with the expression TMI, they know that in a general sense, TMI is just an abbreviation for too much information, and a lot of times that might refer to inappropriate disclosure of personal information. But TMI also refers to a reaction regarding an overload of information. And I'm going to use that second definition, an overload of information, for what I'm sharing today. God knows more than we do. He knows everything. For him to say to Adam and Eve, do not touch that tree of knowledge of good and evil, he knew that that would be an overload of information, an overload of way too much stuff that we wouldn't be able to handle on our own. And again, for what I am going to share, just like in Pandora's box, that was a way too much overload of information and things it wasn't meant for her to handle. So that's what I just wanted to share, how I was looking at the two similarities. And back to this thing here about why we should not lean not on our own understanding, why we should trust God. And one reason is because God's ways are perfect, our ways are flawed. All right. As for God, his way is perfect. The Lord's word is flawless. He shields all who take refuge in him. Psalms 18:30. Okay. All right. God is perfect. He's pure and righteous. Our heart can be deceptive. Okay. God's ways do not change. Our hearts can change. God sees from an eternal perspective. We can only see from day to day. Okay. And we can make plans, but they can only come to pass if God wills it. So anyway, I wanted to share one last thought here with a little bit of time that I have left. This is a copy of a hymnal book that I grew up with. I love the old hymns. And my favorite go-to hymn is Trust and Obey. Okay, I won't be able to share all of this, but I will include a link to it. But one of the things that I love about this has to do with just what it says, trusting and obeying. When we trust in the Lord, when we lean on him, when we do what he says, he sends us joy in our heart, and he gives us the peace and the assurance. And I'm just going to read just the chorus. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. So I'm going to share the lyrics to this because I don't have time to share all of that. But I just wanted to just kind of share my thoughts about that and post the links and just kind of see what you think. But I see a lot of similarity in, again, those two trees, the tree of life, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and like Pandora's box. So I just wanted to share those thoughts today. And if you have any comments, go ahead and leave them in the comment box. So thank you and have a blessed day. Until next time.